Welcome to another episode of DD on the Spot. As always, I'm your host, Ryan Johnson. Before I get to our guests here today, I'd like to remind everyone that if you enjoy this content, to please give a like and subscribe down below. I'd greatly appreciate it. Today, we have Kristy Shields on the podcast. She's a celebrity trainer, as well as a kinesiologist, as well as an Olympic bobsled coach. She's basically a jack of all trades. And if you haven't recognized her right now, she was in a little show. I don't know if you've ever heard of it, called Entourage, for an episode. And we'll talk to her a little bit about that. But most importantly, she's our current guest. Kristy, thank you so much for being on.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So why don't you give us a little bit of a backstory on what inspired and what motivated you to adapt this healthy and fit lifestyle and really get into it?
Well, I've always been someone who liked to move. As a little kid, I was constantly running, climbing, everything. And I had a very athletic older sister. Every sport she did, she was really good at. So when I got into elementary school, all the coaches would say, "Are you going to play basketball like your sister? Are you going to do this? Are you going to do that?" So I felt a certain pressure to try out the same things. So I started playing basketball and I got really involved in sports that way. And as I got older, I started to really enjoy it and challenge myself. And my sister was just naturally talented at sports, but I didn't have that desire to continue it. And so as I got older and into high school, I realized, oh, I could go somewhere with this. I was playing field hockey, I was playing basketball. I know a short Canadian girl playing basketball wasn't probably the best choice, but we had a very strong basketball program here because one of the best coaches I've ever had, he developed the women's program here in this town. I come from a town of about 10,000 people. And that was all the girls really had. The guys had hockey, and when I was a kid, there was no women's hockey program. So I would play. I chose to go play in college post um, high school. But one of the big motivating factors when you're just talking on the fitness and health spectrum, one thing I noticed with some of the girls who were older than me is once they left, they started getting involved in the college scene, they started partying. And these girls who I always looked up to as athletes, I noticed their fitness declining and they're still young. So I thought, well, is this what happens when you stop doing sports when you graduate from high school? So I said, well, in my mind, I'm thinking that's not the way I want my life to go. I don't want the end of my physical, being to end after high school. So I continued. I enjoyed it. I loved the team camaraderie. We traveled, and I spent 2 years playing college basketball. And during that time, I decided that I wanted to specialize in either sports medicine, kinesiology, that direction, because my whole life as a child, I loved animals and I really wanted to be a vet. So I was at that point where I decided this is what I want to do. And then I transferred to university. I went to the University of Calgary after 2 years, and I think I was done with basketball then. But when I got there, I thought I want to do something else. So I just coincidentally met these two girls in a sports store buying running shoes, talking about bobsledding, who ended up being longtime friends. And I said, "What are you two talking about?" And so they told me a little bit about it. And I said, "I want to try that." Because Calgary has a track from the 88 Olympics. And so I went out and I just started trying it for fun, just recreationally. And I just loved it. I love speed. So I got really involved and I continued with it. And this was just prior to women's bobsleigh being a part of the Olympics. The first year for the Olympics was 2002. So I got in just at the right time when things were really blowing up. And we transitioned from being um, less organized and training with maybe the like what would be state level, like provincial level men's teams and the recreational men's teams, to training with the national men's teams, who of course we have some of the strongest in the world. And at that time, we had the gold medalists in that from Olympics. So we jump into that program and things really accelerated, and spent 6 years total on the World Cup circuit for Canada. Really enjoyed it. I didn't compete in the 2002 Olympics. I got injured. I went and watched. So from the World Cup team, they only take two people out of the six of us on the World Cup team. And that was a really great experience getting to go and watch. And of course, all my friends were competing. And I had finished my degree during that time when I was an athlete. And I majored in kinesiology. And I also took massage therapy when I was in Calgary. And I knew that I wanted to work with athletes. That was my whole goal. I wanted to train athletes. So once I graduated, I finished with my bobsled career. I had a friend that I had competed in some fitness competitions with, and it was called the Galaxy. And she is a massively huge celebrity trainer in LA. But she was born in Canada. And she said, "You're crazy if you don't come to LA when you're done your career up there and train people, because this is where training's at. This is the hub." So I moved down there when bobsleigh was over, moved with my best friend who was also an ex-teammate. And she's still currently there, and she's a huge celebrity trainer now. And we started training people from there.
And that's so awesome. But I got to ask, because you are the first bobsledding person that we've had on this podcast, what would you say is the biggest myth and misconception that the general public has about bobsledding?
Uh, I guess that they always ask, what do the people in the back do? Do they do anything? And I think if you understand it's a little bit of physics, obviously, a lot of physics involved here. It doesn't sound like a big job, but the speed at which you get the sled going in the beginning is, it just compounds on the way down. So if you don't have a fast start time, you're not competitive at the end. So if you look at the top teams in the world, they have the fastest start times. So a lot of people don't think the person in the back is that relevant, other than maybe stopping the sled at the end. But their job is really big. So the pilot obviously has to be super experienced. They drive the sled down. That's important. The equipment's important. But if you don't have those athletes just powering you off the top, you don't stand a chance to be in the top three, And that's why in the U.S., a lot of the top football and track and field athletes from college and NCAA, they end up going into the sport. It's super powerful and fast.
Well, and I always like to compare it to swimming, sort of in the Summer Olympics, where there's so many minute things that can determine your overall and end all score. Where, I mean, like with swimming, how they have to like shave basically because that could, detract, like a 1/100th of a second when they're in the water. Same with bobsledding, where, I mean, if you're at a certain position and you get less wind resistance, I mean, it's all about, just minimizing the amount of time that it's going to take you to cross that finish line. So I always just like to say that too, because I have followed bobsledding. I mean, it's one of those sports where when it's on in the Olympics, I always like to watch it because I was like, okay, first of all, these people are crazy going that fast down that thing, especially when they get really close to those edges and it looks like they might maybe fall off and then they stay on. I'm like, oh my God, that is just insane. But that's just so awesome having someone who has done that. And I mean, that's just so awesome. But when you moved to LA, what was the biggest adjustment that you had to make? I mean, coming all the way from Calgary all the way down to LA.
Obviously outside of traffic.
Yeah, that too. Yeah.
Because man, that's a wake up call. But you get in there and you're like, you got to be all in, or you're not getting in those 6 lanes on the freeways. But one of the biggest adjustments, and I'm sure you could appreciate this being from the north, is that we're so friendly and outgoing that when we got there, people thought that was a little odd. What do you want from me? Why are you so friendly? Why are you talking? Hi, how's it going, And they're sort of wondering why you're being so friendly. Like, what does this person want from me? So that was just a bit of a culture clash. I had a bit more of a culture clash. I moved down again after I worked for the Vancouver Olympics in 2010 because I moved to Orange County. And I used to live in LA. So LA is more West Coast. They're very liberal. They're open-minded. I moved to Orange County and I saw Trump signs everywhere and everyone was gun toting. And I'm from Canada. I've never even held a gun. So that was a big wake-up call for me. Definitely. The Republican mindset is very different for a girl from BC.
I was gonna say I just went to the gun range last weekend, so yeah, I can totally understand.
Oh, yeah.
That. Yeah. Well, it's a lot more hunting up here than it probably is a little bit in Orange County, where that's just a big thing up here. But yeah, that's just that for me. I mean, I had a brother who moved down to LA for about a year, and then he moved back because first of all, the rent is just too high, like he was talking about. He's like, there's no way I can afford that down there. But he's like, yeah, that too. It's like people think that you want something from them, but it's just being the friendly Midwestern or the friendly Canadian, where they're just not used to it because they're so used to sort of everyone kind of being a little bit all about themselves and trying to take advantage of people. So yeah, I can totally understand that. But one of the questions that I love to ask, because everyone's genetics are differently, so I think it makes for a fun and interesting answer, especially for the health and fitness guests that I have on the podcast, is what was one body part when you were getting started, really working out and really getting in shape that really, really took off? And then everyone always has that one body part that sort of lags behind, that they have to train to overdrive to get it to catch up to everything else. I'll give you my examples first. So for me, my back, I mean, I had jobs all throughout college where I was lifting and loading packages into trucks. So, I mean, you basically got a really good back or you quit. That's basically what I always like to say. But I'm also 6'3", so I mean, my lower body is just absolutely shot, where I mean, I have to train it into overdrive just to get it to look like any semblance like I train. I mean, I know you were in Entourage, so I got to give my Johnny Drama reference. I mean, calves are my least favorite because, they're the most genetic thing, I think, where, I mean, people are just born with them or they're born without them, but I don't have the Johnny Drama calf injury.
Yeah.
Yep, chest and calves, absolutely. Yeah. But what were those body parts for you when you really got into the gym?
One thing that genetically I was really lucky to be gifted from, my dad's built like this and my sister as well, and some of my brothers, is the abs. So when I started training, they really popped. And I actually didn't quite like it when I was younger because I wanted to look more feminine. But as I got older, I really appreciated this gift, this strong core. I didn't have to worry about carrying more around the middle. I was always lean there. Plus I really defined abs. So I felt really lucky and blessed in that way. One thing I couldn't stand, and as a woman, the same problem is that because I had that muscle, I always had big quads. Like when I was in high school, they used to call me T-Rex because my lower body was like my big. And I had this little tiny upper body, which I've sort of caught up at this point. But I wanted my legs to be skinny like the other girls. I wanted the skinny legs and small waist, and I wanted to be built like that. But as I got older and what I could do with my body, I became so much more appreciative of what I had. But that's always been that struggle for me, is to like lean those legs out and actually, and I'm more talking like the muscle sense that I can put it on like in an instant.
Yeah. No, yeah, and I've had so many guests on where they have, just the different body parts. This is why I love asking it, because one thing that I think really a lot of the general public struggles with is that they just think that, like everyone's body type is the same. Where like if that person can get really big, then I can get really big. But so much of it is the genetic component that a lot of people don't realize. But had you always wanted to be a trainer later on in life, or was it something that you just walked into where you're like, hey, this sounds like that would be something that's really, really interesting?
I wanted to work with athletes and train them for sports. And that was my whole MO when I took kinesiology at school. But I realized at the time it was a little bit harder to break into that. You need a lot of experience. I wasn't a man. So there was a few things that I had to figure out. And then once I moved to Los Angeles, I started working more general population. And that's really where the money was, honestly. And I really enjoyed it. I learned so much once I moved to LA, which is where the majority of the trends for fitness start and spread from. Like anything, not just fitness. I learned so much about training. I started working with more women. So I had to learn Pilates. I learned bar. I had to get cardio. I'd never done cardio. I was a bobsledder. I'm not an endurance athlete. I was all sprints. And my forte prior to that was strength training and lifting, Olympic lifting. And I literally had women say to me, because I was a lot bigger than I was even now, and I had them say to me, don't get me wrong, I think you look really good. I just don't want to look like you. And I said, no offense taken. It took me years to get to that point. And I force fed myself for 3 years to even do that. So I said, don't worry, it's not going to happen. You won't pick up weights, and this is what's going to happen. But having said that, I don't do as much weight training with my clients as maybe another trainer does in a gym. I do a real variety, and it's really specific to what the person needs and wants. Yep. And so I really enjoyed working with the people I had when I was in California. Once I moved back, I started to Canada to work for the Vancouver Olympic Committee. I did start working with athletes again.
And that's just so awesome, because I always say, just with the training the people, there's so many myths and misconceptions that people really have to overcome. And I always say the most popular myth that I love to bust with every single health and fitness guest, I bring it up because it's just so important. It's gotten better the last 5 years, I'd say, because of Instagram, but there's still just so many women that have that fear where if they pick up one weight, they do one push-up, they do one pull-up, they do anything, they're going to put on 50 pounds of muscle overnight. And I always say to that, you'd be the first ever trillionaire. Everybody and their brother. The government would kidnap you and probably like do genetic studies on you and just find out like how they could take your genes and transfer it to like everyone. So you would be like the biggest commodity of all time. Was that ever a struggle that you dealt with when you got started, where you didn't want to get too big? And even if it wasn't, I bet being a trainer, you hear that all the time. How do you like to respond to that?
Yeah, I definitely think there was a certain pressure in LA, especially because I worked with women. People there are quite informed when it comes to diet and workouts, and they hear about every trend and they quiz you and question you on everything you're doing. So one thing I found that I really changed was I changed my own training. I became a lot more cardio oriented because I already had a lot of muscle. So I was coming back from having more muscle and trying to actually shave it off, because I was now wanting to represent my business. So I wanted them to feel comfortable that they weren't going to be put into a position where they thought they might be getting too large. So I leaned out. And then as well, I would approach their training to what they needed. And we didn't pick up a lot of heavy weights. And I think that reassured people as well.
I always love to tell the story of when I was in college and getting bigger and stronger. One of my really good friends, she came up to me and she said, Ryan, I see that you're making a lot of these changes and that you're getting bigger. I want to go to the gym with you, but I'm just afraid that I'm going to get too bulky. And I told her, I said, listen, the amount of weight that you carry in your purse when we go out to clubs, when we go out to the gym, when we go out to, just get something to eat. She had a very heavy purse. Like, I don't know what she had in that. I've carried a few women's purses. It was like a good 20 pounds. I don't know if she had a dead body in there or whatever, but I always say, carrying that purse around, you didn't gain an ounce of muscle. And that sort of convinced her. And she was just like, oh, yeah, you're right. So then she started going to the gym and, she really enjoyed it. But I always say the biggest thing I think that it impacts women so much more than it does guys positively is the confidence boost that you get from working out. I mean, there are
Absolutely.
so many stories that we've heard of people that, have been inspired to do other changes in their life. Like we had one lady who, was able to start her own business just because of the confidence boost that she saw that she could do something. How has that confidence boost impacted you? Because I always say that is the one thing from working out that you can really use to impact every other aspect of your life. How have you used that confidence boost to impact your life?
Well, having been comfortable, obviously, in my own skin and with my body, that's a confidence booster because it's like I know what I'm capable of, and I know I'm happy with what I am. Like this is how I look. I'm not a runway model, but I'm still happy. I've been blessed with a healthy body. So why don't I make the most of it? That's definitely gives me a lot of confidence. Being an athlete, I know what I'm capable of. That's given me confidence. But I just wanted to touch on what you were saying about women being afraid to go into the gym. And that's a combination of factors. Women are concerned that they're going to get that bulk up. And really, that would be very difficult. That would take years of training because women, obviously, we know, don't have the natural testosterone that men do. Even men, it takes them a while to lay down mass. It's going to happen
I can
faster.
agree with that.
Yeah. And women, if and I am sure you could look around the gym and look and see all the girls who lift weights and see how fantastic they look. So I know that this is not true. There's that myth. Plus, a lot of people I know, they go into the gym and they're not sure what to do or what to pick up or how to use the equipment. So that decreases the confidence going in there too. If they have comfort in just trying different things or asking someone to show them, then that confidence goes up too. And so maybe they use a bit of both excuses to stay out of the free weight area or the gym area. Um, and I think once you get that comfort in it, it's easy for me to say because that's a comfortable zone for me. I've been in there a lot. I've done that stuff. But like you said, it's given me confidence. And with time and wisdom, you get more comfortable with who you are, and that acceptance. And I can take that forward. My what makes me happy is when becoming a trainer is I was taking what experience and knowledge I had and sharing it with others to give them confidence and happiness. And I'm very result oriented. So what if I could help them make the positive change they wanted? That is what made me happy. They were happy to see the changes, and I could see the confidence built up in them. And I know it's sad to say that your physical is tied into your emotional or mental happiness, but if it helps, great, because that's going to affect this. If you feel better on the outside, it's going to help the inside, and vice versa. But they're
Absolutely.
all connected.
When I always say too, I think one of the unfair advantages I think a lot of guys have too is that if you are in high school and you do play sports or you do anything, you usually have a general knowledge by the time you graduate of, what to do in the weight room when it comes to, exercise to do. Whereas a lot of women don't have that. So I think guys usually don't have that fear as much because they have that baseline of, here's what I do when I walk in the gym. So I really do think, if they could just introduce it maybe at an earlier age, like around high school, if women wanted it, like here's a separate class where, we can go and we can teach you, basic things. And another issue that I deal with all the time is when I talk to people is that when they first started, they're just afraid that, they're going to be judged when they go to the gym. They're afraid that, they're going to be intimidated by all these big, bulky guys that are in there. And I always tell them, you are going to be the last thing on that person's mind because most of the time, 99% of these people are only in there they're only concentrated on themselves and in their workout, which is, a good way to get that workout in. So it's just about realizing that as well. But also being a personal trainer, it also goes in line with what I like to ask when we have like nurses on or doctors on also in the health and fitness field. What is that like dealing with people that, might have not been dealt the best hand in life? They might be overweight. They might be out of shape. Do you use that as extra added motivation to your own life and to your own physical fitness, knowing that, like you said, you're a strong, healthy individual? Do you use that motivation of seeing and dealing with people that might not be as blessed as you to help you maintain your own lifestyle along with helping theirs?
Absolutely. I see people who are more positive than me, that work harder than me, and maybe, like you said, may have dealt the best hand in life. I know people who have diseases and disorders. They're not. They don't have the ease of physicality that some of us have, and it makes me grateful every day because I can't imagine facing more that kind of adversity or more adversity than we already deal with. So you look at yourself and you go, yeah, I'm pretty blessed. I'm lucky. I'm healthy. I'm happy. I can take care of myself. The people around me are healthy, happy. I'm very lucky. So that's a huge motivator. I find people like that my inspiration because, having to deal with that adversity and keeping that positive attitude, that means everything. And it really keeps things perspective when you get in those points in your life where you do feel low.
I always say the most inspirational person I've ever met. There's a guy in our gym who goes there all the time. He lost an arm and two legs in Iraq when he during an explosion, and he still goes to the gym all the time and he works out. And you'll never meet a more positive guy in his life. And just walking up to him one day, I said, "Hey, I just want you to know that you are just such a huge inspiration. And seeing you come here and have that positive attitude, I always tell myself, it's like, what do I have to be sorry about? Like, what do I have to complain about? So, and just, I mean, it's just so amazing to see how other people deal with those types of adversity, and it can just be such a big boost. And I always like to tell people, if you see that person in the gym, go up and tell them that, that they've helped you with your confidence. I mean, people love to hear that. And it's just so important to just realize that, everyone's not on the same journey. People might be dealing with more stuff than you're dealing with. And just for people to show up to the gym, I mean, it can just be really harder for so many people. So it's like, just treat everyone nice in the gym. I mean, the gym should be one of those places where I think, everyone should just be treated with the utmost amount of respect. But I also love to ask all the trainers that we have on here, because you go on Instagram, you see all these, transformation photos of all these clients, and you see like how positive it is and how confident it makes them. But I always wonder what that's like for the trainer. What is that experience like for you, knowing that you have helped out someone better their lives? Because we always hear what it's like for the trainee, but what is that experience like for you?
That is the best reward. That is the motivator in this business. I can't speak for other trainers, but for me, that is what makes me the happiest. I mean, yes, I know I work in a great industry too, and there's a lot of perks, but what drives me and what really pushes me with my clients is to achieve that, because I see how happy they are. They're not happy during. And I don't care. I told them, I'm like, hate me now, love me later. I'm okay with that. That is my work motto. Because that the moments you see that look, those daggers they give you, that's okay. But if they get any improvement, I see that change in their attitude. I see that change in their happiness. You see the change just in how they carry themselves. That is my ultimate reward.
Mhm. Yeah, and I mean, I just can't really imagine what that feels like. I mean, that would just have a job that, I mean, is just that fulfilling. I mean, I just can't imagine. But before we move on, I mean, we definitely got to talk about the elephant in the room. I mean, you played a character in Entourage that, I mean, I always I told her before I started recording this, me and my brothers, we watch that series, the whole thing, usually about once a year during the summer. Usually we all get together for a couple, like on a weekend, we might watch, binge watch, half a season. Then we just get together the next one. So first of all, I got to ask, how did you get that role?
Well, I was doing some contract work as a trainer when I was first in LA for a gentleman who is a big celebrity trainer. His name's Harley Pasternak, and he knew a woman who was casting for the part. And this was prior to the show ever starting, so we didn't actually even know what it was about. So I get this phone call. I was not into acting, but everybody just assumes because you're in LA, you are. And I get this phone call out of the blue, and a woman calls me and says, "Hi, can you be at the studio tomorrow at this time?" And I'm like, "Excuse me? Sorry, who is this?" And she kind of seemed maybe a little taken back, and I was a little taken back. And I'm like, I'm sorry, what is this for? And she kind of gave me a brief rundown. It's for an audition for this part. This person gave me your number. I hope that's okay. And I said, "Oh, okay, sure. That sounds interesting. I'll go." And I knew that it was for a fitness part. And at the time, I'd done a couple infomercials and some print stuff for fitness related work. So I kind of thought it was something like that. And I'd never done any speaking roles. I'd never done any acting. So I show up at said location the next day, and there's two other girls auditioning for the same part as me. I happen to know both. Just pure coincidence. One of them was an athlete that I ran track with for a while, and her and I are both pole vaulters. I didn't get to mention that. I did run track at University of Calgary while I was bobsledding, and I did pole vault. When I went to California, I was continued doing it for a while, and I knew her from there. But I think what worked against her is that obviously a lot of the characters in real life are maybe not so tall, and she was tall. She was probably like 5'10". The other woman I was auditioning against, and now I forgot her last name, but she was a big time fitness competitor. She's competing in the fitness competitions. Her name was Mandy. And unfortunately, I heard she passed away last year. Very beautiful girl, blonde. And in California, she was a trainer as well. But she'd been on a number of magazines and all that up till this point. And she was really lovely. And they, for some reason, chose me. So I had no idea I get called into a room. I'm sitting out there waiting. I walk into the room. I haven't been given a script. I don't know. Is this comedy? Is this a show? Is this I don't know what's happening. There's about 9 men sitting in a semicircle when I walk in. And I walk into the front. I don't know how to dress for this thing, nothing. I was standing there, and they said, okay, read the line. And the woman who had cast me was there, and she read to me, and I retorted back. And they all started laughing, and I'm like, oh, I must have done that horribly. That's so embarrassing. And they did the next one. They start laughing again, and I'm like, oh no, this is embarrassing. And then they said, one more thing, could you show us your abs? So I showed them my abs, and they said, okay, thank you. We'll be in touch. And I walked out, and I'm like, I have no idea what just happened there. Was that good, that bad? Well, I must have been lucky because I'm sure this does not happen on a regular basis. I'm walking to my car, and one of the gentlemen who was one of the producers runs out and stops me and says, excuse me, you have the part. Could you make your biceps a bit bigger by next week? And I said, I'll do my best because I think they wanted a little more extreme look. So they cast me, and the next day I got a big script in the mail, and I got to meet the whole cast, which was a blast. They are so fun, and they were so nice. It was such an enjoyable time working with them. Larry Charles, he's one of the producers, and he also worked on Seinfeld, I believe. He came to us and said that they were talking about. He said that maybe they'd like to have me on again because I had good chemistry with Johnny Drama. And I thought, great. He was nodding. He said, like, hey, that's great news for you. You know what I mean? But they never did. They changed the script very regularly, and I was flattered to have been there in the first place. I had my 15 minutes. It was a blast. I actually got recognized a couple times after that. I couldn't believe it. So it was fun.
That's so awesome. And I got to ask, because you don't have a Canadian accent for that character, did that take any preparation to change your accent, or was it just you just got so used to how people talk down there that you're just able to change it?
My best friend and I, we moved down there. We made a point of neutralizing our accent. And we had a jar. We lived together. We first moved down there, and we had a jar. We said, every time you say a, dollar goes in the jar. So we really, after we got a few comments, we really both toned it down. And I spend most of my time in Canada now, as of this last year, and a lot of people tell me that I don't sound Canadian. So I probably picked up a little bit in the last number of months.
I always say one of the funniest stories that I have is my brother. He was a former professional baseball player, and he played up in Kelowna for summer there for one of the Kelowna Falcons up there. And he said, because obviously you have a host family that you stay with when you play with those teams, and he says, and I told him, I was like, how many times do they say A up there? Be honest. He's like, you would never imagine. It's more often than they talk about, like, in the media or whatever. And he's like, it's so hard to get used to that. He's like, they say it almost at the end of everything. So that's just a funny story where he was just talking about, like, the first few times that he heard it, he's like, oh, that's really funny. And then towards the end, he's like, oh my God, they actually really do say it, like, as much as people say. Yep.
I was shocked when I would move down to California and I come back to visit, and my brothers would be talking, and my dad, and I'm like, is that what we really sound like? I didn't realize it was, it was that drastic. I'm like, wow, we're really something.
No, yep. And I got to ask, the last question about Entourage is, when you were on the set, did you have any expectation, or was there any feeling among the cast that this was going to be a huge hit? Was there kind of an inkling that people were like, oh my God, the chemistry of this cast really is something special?
I think there was, being that it hadn't come out yet, there was a big unknown. And what I'd heard some people describe it as prior to coming out that were working on the show was like the male version of Sex and the City. So that kind of popularity, that kind of genre. And I sensed that there was a really cool vibe there between the behind the camera and the people who are on the shows, And also, you look at Mark Wahlberg was producing it, and he was a huge factor in that, being based loosely on his life, and the story behind it. And every guy I've always talked to has always said how much they love that show. So I'm not sure if they really knew it was going to be that kind of hit. They knew it was going to be pretty cool. It was sort of new. It's a guy male version, that kind of sitcom-y thing. But I don't think they knew it was going to be that big. Like, it's a cult now.
Oh, absolutely. Like that comparison between that and Sex and the City, I can totally agree that is the guy version of Sex and the City, where any guy that you talk to, I mean, I remember even going to parties in college where people would just quote it still, constantly all the time, where that is just a huge show. And I mean, that's just so awesome that you got to be a part of that. But going back into your health and fitness, so you're a kinesiologist. Could you explain to the people out there maybe who don't know what that is, what exactly kinesiologist does?
Just to break down, keep it really simple, kinesiology is the study of human movement. So, I've heard different university programs is called human kinetics, or it used to be physical education, but they branched out, made it more scientific. So where I went, it was kinesiology. So when you say kinesiologist, I'm someone who studies human movement. And I do a lot of, like, even with my clients, I do a lot of therapeutic work. I've done a lot of post-injury, post-rehab, post-surgery work with them. But currently, I've also taken a position, it's seasonal, with one of the top fitness retreats in the world. They're like, I think they won TripAdvisor in 2017. They were like the winner of TripAdvisor's fitness and spa retreats in the world. They won Condé Nast Award for being one of the top in the world. They're in the top 5 to 10 every year, and they're actually here, which surprised me, in Canada, in a very, very, very small town. So when I heard about the job, I thought, I grew up here. I had no idea there was even a fitness retreat there. And they hired me as a kinesiologist. So basically, my job with them is I do all the body composition when the guests arrive, do all the measurements, weighing them. We talk about a little bit what their goals are and work towards that. I give them ideas. They're only there for a week or 2 weeks at a time, so you don't have a lot of time with them. I spend time with them. I take them in the weight room. You're talking about that comfort. We try to educate people to take home with them all the information they can to make changes in their daily life. Not just this 1 week where they have some good results. We want them to take that home and continue with it. So I take them in the gym. I get them comfortable with any movements there and what it should feel like. We talk about core. We do cardio. I give them the whole spiel and in any fitness information, and people get really great results. So I'm really been enjoying that. People come in are really cool. They come from mainly from the US, but they come from all over the world.
That's so awesome. But a question that I love to ask all the guests that I have that from the north, I mean, the vast majority of my guests come from, the southern parts of the US where they don't have any experience with this, but I'm just going to say this as an understatement. It can get very cold during the winter, especially in Canada and up in Minnesota. And one of the big things that a lot of people struggle with is finding that motivation to go to the gym when let's say, it might be negative 20 degrees Fahrenheit. I'll use the American version, Fahrenheit, outside. I mean, it can be very, very cold, or very, very cold, and very hard to find that extra added motivation to go to the gym. What tips and tricks do you like to tell people, especially being up in Canada too, where it's, just absolutely cold as well, to be able to have that motivation to go to the gym when basically your body is just basically in hibernation mode? We're just telling you, hey, watch some Netflix, curl up and have, some hot tea or some hot cocoa or something like that. How are you able to motivate yourself to still get those workouts in, even when the weather is making it very difficult on you?
I find, obviously, being in California, it was very easy because you could go out any day and it's fun to go outside and get a workout in. It's fun to head out and do that stuff. But 8 months of the year, you might find that very difficult to get out just purely because of the weather. So what I find is that the biggest motivator, get yourself, whether you go to a gym or you go to a studio that offers classes, you get there at least 3 times a week, because not only are you going to get your fitness in, but you're going to get your social activity in. You're going to see people, you're going to be part of community. And that is a huge factor in depression and long winters and short days. It is very easy to just say, I don't need to. But another thing and I've gotten my daughter into it now too, because this is adjustment for her. She grew up in California until recently. She's just turned 7. I already knew, but we learned to ski together. And outdoor activity, I know this sounds harsh. I mean, it's not like Alaska or something where it's unbearably cold, but getting outside is a huge factor during those winter months. We snowshoe, we cross-country ski, we downhill ski, whatever it is that you enjoy. I just get outside. Some people just go walk, just get your snow boots on and walk, and just get some of that daylight in, because that also is stimulating and decreases the odds of depression and just wanting to stay in and curl under that blanket.
That leads me actually into a story that I've told a handful of times on this podcast, because as you know, probably from the last winter, that big polar vortex that hit the center part of the United States, we got the brunt of it. So for my full-time job, I work at UPS, and one of my jobs being in the management is at the end of every night, we go out and we have to check all of the trucks and cars in the parking lot and make sure that the ones that showed up really showed up, and the ones that say that they're full of packages are really full of packages. So during the polar vortex, the area that I lived in got hit the worst, where it was negative 60 degrees with the wind chill. So that's basically like the scientist came on and said 90 seconds of exposed skin is going to get you frostbite.
Yeah.
So And guess what? You guys still have to go out there and you still have to go do your yard check. So for 45 minutes, so that day I was fully prepared. I had 5 layers on in every area, 5 layers of hands, 5 layers of coats, 5 layers of pants. I was good to go. The
Face.
only thing that wasn't covered was my eyes. And one time I closed my eyes for about 10 seconds and the eyelashes froze together. So I had to cough into my hands and then, put it on to get it. But that's like the type of cold too, where I mean, you can't even breathe because even breathing hurts because it literally dries out your entire throat. So yeah, that's very,
That's
very,
next level though. That's
yeah.
that's when I would say, no, people, now we stay inside. Do you know what? And you probably have this in Minnesota. Do you know what all the hockey rinks have in Canada? A lot of them already do, and many people are putting them in. They put tracks around the seating area so that people can come together, and you'll see people walking with the pushing baby carriages, the running around the track, and then you get that social aspect, you get the fitness, and you get that community vibe. And I think that coming back here and seeing how do people cope with that, because I had it easy in California. I really, really can appreciate the effort that people go to for their community, and really push to have that in their community, because like you said, what are you going to do when you do get those cold snaps? No one's going out.
Yep. Well, I always say that was the one time that they said that we were colder here than it was in Antarctica. So that's like the one
Oh,
time. So that's when you kind of realize, like, hey, and it lasted for 2 days, but we got out of that. I mean, they had people, pushing around hot chocolate carts the whole day. And let's just say I drank a thing of hot chocolate and I was so cold that I couldn't tell how warm it was. So I woke up the next morning and the inside of my mouth was a little bit blistered, but
oh,
it was worth it that night because I kind of realized, hey, I definitely needed that. But two of the questions that I love to ask all of my health and fitness guests that I have on the podcast, for the first one, there have been so many positive things that have happened for me since I, started getting in shape and working out and getting bigger and stronger. But one of the negative
awesome.
things is you're going to get asked to move a lot of people's furniture. You're going to get asked to open a lot of pickle jars. I mean, I'm still at home with my parents for the next couple of months before I move out, and every single time they have groceries brought home, I basically have to lift the car into the driveway and carry in all the groceries. Has that been a similar experience with you where people take one look at you and they just assume that you can do favors for them?
Every time, to the point where, being a woman, I've had male friends who've asked me to move appliances, like large appliances, and I've sort of said, I almost feel a little insulted. I understand I'm probably the strongest friend you have, but I don't find that very flattering. Go find some male friends. I don't have time for this. I've moved enough people's houses, and my mom still feels that with me. I still carry the groceries in. I still carry the heavy plants for her, help her out in the garden and do all that stuff. So it's been a constant, and then when you're around men who are lovely gentlemen and they don't expect you to, allow me to get that, but you can do it yourself. I find it flattering. It's nice, but I think I'm always a little surprised you can do it yourself. I mean, those bobsleds are heavy.
Oh yeah, well, and I always say, like, I'm at that age too where everyone's starting to move out now. So every other weekend, basically now, especially now that it's warmer, it's going to be, hey Ryan, you want to come help me move? And I always say, well, I don't want to, but I'll do it. Like, but don't expect me, just like be like skipping down the street, coming down there. But yeah, and I always say, being 6'3" too, it's always a double-edged sword because even if I had no muscle at all, they'd always say, oh yeah, tall guy can do it. So that's one thing that I've really had to adjust to. But now, probably my favorite question to ask, and the audience favorite as well. And I always say this is a multi-million-dollar idea, but there's always I always say that there's a problem that a lot of fit women deal with when it comes to clothing, because I mean, fit guys have their own problem when it comes to clothes. See, we get that reaction all the time. Fit women have their own problems. I always say, if you have big broad shoulders, dresses aren't your best friend. Jeans are another thing that we hear all the time, where if you have a big lower body and a small waist, jeans are not made for that. How have been some ways that you have found that you're able to compensate for the fact that your clothing options can be limited at times?
Uh, all I could say is thank God when they added lycra and stretch to jeans, because that was completely off the table for a long time for me. And a lot of my male friends too, for bobsleigh, those poor guys, I rarely see them in jeans. And if they do, you probably know this phenomenon. The waist is so baggy, they got that thing cinched up because not getting over the button legs. But I couldn't wear jeans for years. I still, if the jeans do not have stretch them, I still can't wear them because I can't get them over my quads. The crotch is sort of like mid thigh. That's about as far as it gets. So I do have to pick and choose what I wear, because like I said, I'm grateful every day for what I've been given, but I'm not built like the typical female. I'm like straight, so if you did my BMI, what the BMI measurement
Yep.
is, it would tell you that I'm unhealthy because I don't have a big difference between my hips to waist. And so we don't use that measurement for that reason. But I can't just wear regular women's clothing. I have to pick and choose what I wear, and it's a little more challenging. Like, if I wore a t-shirt, not just like a tank top like this, but a t-shirt that's like cut off sleeves, I look like I'm going to play football. So, I have to be a little specific about what I wear.
Oh yeah, and especially with some of the bodybuilders that I have on, where they basically have to have two different wardrobes for when they're competing and when they're, in off season. But yeah, it's just, I always say for someone out there, I mean, I know that they've slowly been, building, some companies that, sell fitness gear to men and women. But, I had two fashion guys on the show, and I always told them, I said, hey, I have so many health and fitness guests, especially women that, are dying to have some clothes for them. So, but they haven't got started yet. So we will see in the future if they've come up with something. But now, as we get towards the end here, I always like to do my audience favorite little questionnaire where we're going to ask Kristy here about a dozen or so health and fitness-esque questions, sort of like
A
more of like a
dozen.
getting to know you. Well, they're short. They're short. It's almost like a rapid fire-ish kind of thing where
Okay.
we'll just find out, we'll see how our answers stack up to everyone else that we've had on the show. So for our first question, what is your go-to workout song at the moment?
Mm. Uh, I have to say my daughter's got me onto Body
Mhm.
by Loud Luxury. Like that's kind of, she got that hook in my head, that loop just going. So I use it for a lot of my classes.
That's awesome. I always say I gotta have my old school '80s music where it's just got to be the cheesiest '80s, like White Snake, Foreigner
Oh, I
Journey.
love it.
Yep,
That's my favorite. I'm a classic rock freak, so
yep.
I love that stuff.
And like I know if I have a leg day and I know it's gonna be hell, I gotta crank my Metallica and just get myself psyched up. But I have a problem. So like I have a gym at home, which is nice. But when I say gym, I mean it's just basic equipment where it's just enough to basically just maintain the shape that you're in. And then I work out there about half the time, and then the other half I go to a gym. But I am also known at the gym as the guy that waits for the beat to drop. So if I'm doing like a lat pull down, I've had times where I'm just waiting for like 30 seconds, and I've had people come up to me and be like, "Hey, are you all right? Did you like pull out your back or something like that?" And I'm like, "Nope, just waiting for the
Nope.
beat to drop."
Just
Yep,
wait. Here it
yep,
comes.
yep.
Here it
So
comes.
I'm known
I
as
I love I teach classes too. So I love to use a real combination throughout all the decades, and I use a real mix from 70s, 80s, 90s, all the way up, and people love it. What I like is that you get that mix in there, and there's always people in the class who can relate more to some other songs, and you can see them just like, yeah, that's my jam. Then I know I'm hit it right. Like they see that just so happy, like yeah, like right now, yeah, we're in a real like disco crush right now.
well, I always say I always got to listen to at least one song from the Rocky movies. Usually the Rocky 4 soundtrack. I mean that is my jam. I mean the '80s, it was basically a decade built for workout songs. Basically, I mean
Rocky
they had the
Four.
rhythm down. Yep,
That's my favorite, Rocky Four. There's
yep.
no easy way out. I don't know who sings a song. But oh
Robert
my god.
Temper, and I don't know how I
Yes,
know that. Yeah, yeah, but
I'm
yeah,
impressed you know that.
I have that whole soundtrack of that movie on my iPod, and I mean that song or songs from that movie come on at least once during. I mean that is one of the best soundtracks to work out to listen to, and I highly recommend that to anyone else out there. But now being a celebrity trainer, I gotta ask: are any celebrities that the general public might know of that you're training?
Some I'm not allowed to mention
Okay.
because we've signed what's called an NDA,
Yep.
non-disclosure clause. But trying to think who would be okay for me to mention. Queen Latifah, some of my clients.
Wow.
Yeah, very, very amazing lady, fun, generous, just cool. Yeah, just like she appears when you see her in movies, just that awesome vibe. Um, that was more recently, but working in LA and Hollywood, a lot of the people that you work with are real power players, but they're behind the scenes
Yep.
type people. So they're really well known in the industry, but perhaps not in front of the camera all the time.
Well, and I gotta say, because the question that I normally ask that I'll ask right now then too is, out of all the celebrities on the planet, if you could train any celebrity on the planet, who'd it be?
Mm, good question. That's do I get to choose like an athlete
Oh,
too?
anything, yeah, any type of celebrity.
Oh, it, my dream, because I love working with everybody, and everybody has their own needs and desires and what they want to work on. And what I like working with athletes is that it's always challenging too, right? Like I worked with hockey players for a number of years. When I was in Canada, I had a company, I trained hockey players, and I found hockey very challenging because now these guys have to be fast, they have to be big, they have to be strong, they have to be explosive, and they have to have pretty amazing endurance. So, and their agility. So I found that incredibly challenging because we're training every aspect. But not that I wouldn't like to work in that capacity again. But you know what sport I've always really wanted to work with? I've always wanted to work with like supercross and motocross. I want to work with like that X game athlete because I'm like, this is a whole, how do you can't completely prevent an injury when you're always walking that line. But these guys are doing tricks and flying, and they have to be like what it takes to sustain that. I always, when I was in California, I was like, oh, I would love to break into that sector. So that would have been like up there, in my next life.
That is the first type of athlete that we've ever heard that someone's want to train. I think that yeah, that would be super interesting as well. But now, what is one item that you always need to have in your fridge?
Do I have to just name one?
Well, you can do multiple then.
Other than tequila? Um, I know this. I don't have an issue with dairy, and I always have eaten dairy, but I've tried to step away from it, and I always have almond milk now in my fridge, and that sounds so boring. Like, oh. And I took a lot of supplements when I was training as an athlete. You always had to be taking, like your protein shakes and stuff. And I still sometimes use that stuff, but I think I almost burn myself out on it. So what I'm more into now is whole foods, natural whole foods. And this sounds like my poor clients who, bless their hearts, I make them drink this all the time. I have the Vitamix blender, and I blend organic kale, spinach, lemon, ginger. This is my standard recipe, and berries, and I blend it, and I drink one of those at least once a day. So I'll blend it and keep a few in the fridge at a time, or I'm taking to my clients. And that sounds a little boring, but man, just chocked full of vitamins and minerals.
I always say the most surprising answer that I've gotten on here, and it comes from a lot of the bodybuilders, is mustard because, they douse, their chicken, their eggs in mustard just to give it a little bit of flavor. It's 0 calories, 0 in fat. So I always say to that, you might want to reevaluate your life if you're doing that, dousing mustard on everything. But, that is by far the most shocking answer that
I get there's a time and place for that because they have to eat so low carb and low fat and things like that, especially going into competition. So mustard was always kind of the go-to because ketchup had too much sugar and all that stuff. But and I've done the whole low carb thing, and maybe you go through phases where I'll eat less starch. But I'm really into more balanced approach now because I feel it's more sustainable. Even in the fitness world, you're starting to see that trend shift a little bit because especially with some of the women, you'd see such a water and weight drop that these women couldn't sustain it throughout the year where they were closer to their competition weight. They could be closer in a natural way to their competition size and shape, it would just make they won't throw off the hormones and end up in the long run where they're having major problems, you know, with their metabolism down the road.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. But now, out of all your followers that you have on Instagram, what would be one thing that you think they'd be shocked and surprised to find out about you if they met you in person?
I always get, "You're shorter than I thought you would be," and I always thought it was because I was loud and kind of had a big mouth. Come across as being taller.
We hear that all the time. That's another thing too that I discover is that, a lot of times, but I'm the exact opposite. So if they met me, they'd be like, "Oh wow, you're actually taller." But yeah, we get that answer a lot. But now if someone were
You're
to walk up,
tall.
yeah, well, yeah. I mean, I had that pitcher's body too, though, where I was a little bit skinnier now, so it took me a little bit longer to put on the muscle, just because your body's a little bit more long
Oh
and
yeah.
lengthy. But I bet you understand that dealing with a lot of athletes too, they're probably usually a little bit taller. But I find that story about hockey players funny because I remember, looking at and reading some books, back in the old ages when they, smoke cigarettes between shifts on the bench, and they weren't in the healthiest of shape. So now what those athletes have to do now, I mean, is just astounding. But now if someone were to walk up to you and say, "Kristy, we made a decision that, you could change one thing about the health and fitness industry or lifestyle and everyone would go along with it," what would be one thing that you would like to see changed?
I'd like to see people being more active.
Mhm.
And having said that, I don't mean go out there and just destroy yourself every day in boot camp or like, that whole aspect. I mean, not enough people are moving on a regular basis. And I get it. We're tired, we're busy, we are running around. People are having to work longer hours than they used to work. Life is a lot more imbalanced than it used to be. But if that was one thing that I could provide, because that is going to help every aspect, your health, your fitness, stress, anything, depression, it's going to help in that aspect. So now stepping back and looking at studies of the number of people who aren't, yet we know how it can increase the quality of your life, that would be one thing I'd say if I had to pick just one thing.
Yeah. No, I mean, I couldn't agree with you more on that because especially with the obesity crisis and just, all that's going on, I gotta say, props to you too, because I had a health and fitness specialist come on and he was talking about, if the parents have that healthy and fit lifestyle, it is so much easier for the kids to then adapt that. And it's been proven that they are vastly more likely to maintain that lifestyle. So that's one thing that I could say as well is just, really be that inspiration for your kids to all the parents out there that are listening to this so that they have that motivation
Absolutely.
and so that they
It's
know
never
those
too
tricks.
late.
Yep.
It's never too late to turn out. And another, not to frighten people off, but one thing that studies are proving now too is you can actually pass on where your genes are at. You can change your DNA and by activity and lifestyle, and that happens pre-conception. So, like someone who, you can change the quality of your sperm that you pass on to a child. With that's before it's even conceived. So this is you are going to put that kid in a better position if you give them, a head start.
Absolutely, yeah, and that's so amazing. And for the last few questions that we have of the questionnaire, if you were able to go back in time and talk to the 18-year-old version of yourself, what would be the best piece of advice you would give her?
Oh yeah, just enjoy the ride and take it easy on yourself. Because man, you look back, you realize how hard you are on yourself, and I should have appreciated much more what I had when I had it.
And you just realize too, well, I'm 24, so I'm just slowly starting to realize that where I mean, all of the little things that happen that you make such a big deal out of aren't really that big at all. So just,
No,
yeah. Yep.
you know that book and the expression "Don't sweat the small stuff,"
Yep.
because it doesn't matter if you do or you don't. It's just how your reaction to
Absolutely.
everything.
Mhm.
And that was one a piece of advice that I've taken from someone is you'd say enjoy the ride and it goes by quickly. And when you're 18, you find that really hard to believe. But once I had a child, which I didn't think I'd ever be a parent, once I had one, everybody said enjoy it because it goes by fast. And I really took that to heart because it really did. The whole baby phase, everything. I really enjoyed it.
We hear that a lot. So again, I cannot say that enough. But now, if we were to talk to you a year from now, where would you like to be at? Career wise, where would you like to be at in your overall life? What improvements or what goals do you have if we were to talk to you a year from today that you would like to have achieved?
Well, personally, I would like to actually become more fit and more present. So this sounds really ironic, but being a trainer in LA, I spent numerous hours in the car. And I think people just assumed that my friends and I, who are trainers as well, that we just lived this impeccable lifestyle where we ate wonderful food and we didn't drink. And, I didn't drink 6 cups of coffee a day, and I did. And now spending more time in Canada, I can actually have a little more quality of life, and I'm getting a lot fitter and stronger than I was. I was in 2 car accidents when I was in California. I had to get a lot of strength and muscle back that I lost from some back pain. So I'm going to continue to improve that. I'm also working on a website right now, and being that you can only be in one place at one time, and I did this in California. How can I spread the message or share more with people like in a way without having to be there every second with them. So I'm right now creating programs that I'm going to have on my website, and a year from now, I'd like to see that up and running because I'm learning as I go. Like you said, you started your podcast. There's a lot more involved than you thought there was. I'm not a techie, so I'm learning as I go here.
Same here, yeah. That is one thing
Yeah,
that I have, yeah, I could not tell you the amount of times that I've, I always like to say if I can make, the one podcast better than the next, just slowly improve and improve. But yeah, I totally understand where you're coming from. But now the last question of the questionnaire. If someone were to walk up to you on the street and say like, "Oh my God, you look amazing. How do I get into shape like that?" What is your best piece of advice that you like to give people just to be able to get started? Because for so many people, I think just to be able to take that first step into the gym, like we talked about earlier on in the podcast, can be just the hardest thing for them. What piece of advice do you like to give people just to have that motivation to be willing to take that step?
and I've heard this a lot from people where they're like, "How do I get started?" And what I find, and even when I've stepped away from it and tried to come back, the hardest part is that first 1 to 3 weeks, just creating that habit, because when maybe you're sore, it doesn't feel normal, you haven't done this in a while, getting back in shape is a challenge. But I just tell people stick with it. You create that habit after 21 days, stick with it, and be consistent. Consistency is always the way to get those goals. Consistency. You do not need to be perfect. Like go by like that 75-25 or 80-20% rule. 80% of the time you're eating well, 20% of the time maybe fall off the wagon. But one fault a lot of people make is they fall off the wagon once, they think, I'm screwed, and they just stay off the wagon. So if you could stay active and continue to be active, even if it's not always at the level you might want to be, that's something I'd encourage, because when you're coming in cold turkey, it's always a little more challenging. So I just tell people when you're starting again, meet yourself where you're at. Don't make yourself so sore you can't walk all week. You maybe haven't done anything about. Start walking. Go to gentle yoga. Pick up some lighter weights. Whatever it is, attend a light and easy class, and go from there, because you're going to evolve and develop too. But I just that one thing. Don't change everything at once. You can't diet. Start an exercise routine. I just really encourage people to not do all those things at once because it's overwhelming. So I'll just be like, you know what? Just start with some cardio this week. Next week, maybe we'll do something else. Then let's talk about diet after that.
Yep.
But if you take on too much at once, it's easier to walk away from it because it's overwhelming.
Mhm. No, yeah, and I totally understand that, just the baby steps, because there are some people, like you said, that just like to go all out for the first day, and then they realize, oh, hey, I'm really sore. And I like to compare it to, trying to get in shape and someone who's an alcoholic, where if you're an alcoholic and you take one day off of drinking, I mean, that is already significant progress, where if you go to the gym for one day and you look in the mirror, nothing's going to have changed.
Yeah.
It's really one of those things where it just takes such a time processing, especially with my generation, where everyone wants the results now and they want them yesterday. I mean,
Yeah.
it can be so hard for people to be in it for the long run. But now, before we wrap things up, is there anyone that you'd like to give a shout out to?
Um, yeah, a few people. Well, okay, my favorite fitness line of clothing, and these are like great friends, lovely friends of mine in California, and some of the gear that you see me wearing online is from Corral, from Teresa and Peter. I just want to say hi to them, and I miss them so much, and I love their gear, and it's Koral. So, because I get women stop and ask me all the time about it, and so they're a fairly new fitness company, so I direct them towards that. Um, let's see. Of course, to my family and friends. I want to say hi to my little baby girl, Paisley. I'll show her this later. And I want to say hi to all my people at Mountain Trek, where I'm currently working at the fitness retreat, who have been such a blessing in my life. And I've really, really enjoyed this whole process. Um, and of course, I want to say hi to my friends in California, whom I miss very much while I'm here working, and the people who've helped me and given me my start. You know who you are.
And that's awesome. And again, you guys, definitely. Well, first of all, let us know when that website gets launched, and I'd love to give it a shout out on here. I mean, I love promoting the guests that we have on. But again, you guys, go and give Kristy a follow on Instagram. I'll leave a link to her stuff down below. And again, we cannot thank you enough for being on. I mean, it was so great talking to you and hearing
You
your
too,
story.
Ryan.
Yeah, and I
Thank
really
you.
really appreciate it. So again, you guys, this is Ryan Johnson, DD on the spot, signing out. Have a great day, everyone.